How did Fazbear Entertainment begin? The origins of Fazbear Entertainment is the most heated topic of debate at the moment in the FNAF community, due to the fact that Secret of the Mimic changed the way we looked at our origins forever. But today we're going to be going back and solving the FNAF Origins timeline, and we'll be going further back than anyone has ever gone before, all the way to the 1840s. Creating a FNAF timeline has got to be one of the hardest things to do, and it's because everyone interprets the information differently. Now in my timeline, we start all the way back during the 1840s during the great time of the California Gold Rush. I believe the Afton family moved to California to participate in the Gold Rush, which eventually ended up dying out during the 1850s. A few generations went by, but by the year of 1893, a son was born to the family, and his name was Frederick Afton. Now, Frederick Afton growing up always had the desire to become an artist, and by that point, the Afton family was well established in California and didn't seem to be going anywhere. So he started to look around to find a job becoming a comic artist for the ever-growing industry of newspapers. It's also worth mentioning that by the year 1900, the show business started becoming extremely popular from Hollywood and California, with a lot of old cinematography videos and TV shows that we still hear about today. And so, Frederick was growing up in this time period, learning more about show business and wanting to become an artist for the newspaper. In the year of 1918, he was married, and the very next year he was finally hired by the San Francisco Examiner, one of the most popular newspapers in California to involve comic strips. And he finally was living his dream, creating characters and writing funny stories that everyone seemed to love. And by the year of 1920, him and his wife had their very first child, and his name was John Afton. And just a few years later, something would happen that would change Frederick's life, ultimately, for better or for worse. You see, in the year of 1923, Walt Disney opened his very first studio, and throughout the following year, he was looking for good artists to become his cartoon artists. And in 1924, he was looking at the artist from the San Francisco Examiner, which wasn't foreign to him. It was one of the most popular newspapers at the time, which, after looking at it, he saw Frederick Afton was a wonderful artist and he loved his drawings. And so he hired Frederick Afton on to the Disney studio to become a cartoon artist. Frederick was absolutely flabbergasted that Walt Disney would notice someone like him, and gave everything his all to make the best drawings, create the best characters for the studio. But tragedy struck in 1928, when Frederick Afton was let go from the Disney studio due to a competitor artist. And by this point, Frederick Afton didn't know what to do. He had to support his family. And so he started looking around to try to find a newspaper that would hire him on. Unfortunately, the position that he held at the San Francisco Examiner once before had already been taken, and the closest newspaper that would hire him was in Utah. And so, Frederick Afton had to relocate his family there and took that job and started designing comic strips for that newspaper. He was even able to create some of his very own characters, one of which was a silly brown bear wearing a top hat and bow tie, as a throwback to his childhood days when top hats and bow ties were a big part of his life. But just the very next following year, in 1929, the Great Depression hit, and the newspaper fired him simply because they couldn't support paying him anymore. The newspapers were now focusing on more important things and didn't need to be wasting money on an artist for a comic strip. And so Frederick Afton was at a loss again for what to do and how to support his family. But it was then that he realized something. Because of his past experience growing up in California and being involved in a lot of show business, he had a lot of experience in that type of thing. And he started noticing that in Utah, there was a lot of roadside attractions that would pop up by very small creators, but they were able to support their families because the need for entertainment was becoming a lot larger due to the fact that a lot of people were working and were tired and simply wanted to be entertained and have something fun to do after a long day's work. And if you gave it the right price, more people would go to the cheaper shows simply because it was a cheaper price and they got entertainment. And so Frederick Afton decided to take his first step. At this point, his decision didn't seem to be something to him that would heavily affect the future, but to him, right now, he had to do it to support his family. But he needed a character that was very unique and something that would draw attention. And so he went back to some of his comic strips that he himself had designed and owned the copyright to the characters of, and found one specific character that stood out to him, one that he liked the most. And it was named after himself, Frederick. and that was Fredbear, the classic brownish golden bear wearing a top hat and a bow tie. And so with the little money that he had left, he was able to hire a bear trainer, and they constructed a roadside attraction called Fredbear Singing Show, which officially released in 1934. By this point, Fred was 41 and his son, John Afton, was a teenager, and so John was able to help out with the attraction, and together the two of them were able to make it something that would last for many years to come, and ultimately saved their family during the Great Depression. But by 1940, John Afton walked away from Fredbear Singing Show. He had higher desires of doing something better. He decided to go into the medical industry and become a doctor. And so by 1941, he was married and was actively pursuing becoming a doctor, and kind of left his father behind to deal with Fredbear Singing Show all on his own. And his father ended up stopping the show simply because he was starting to become too old, and honestly, just was tired of doing it anymore. And honestly, when his son left, it kind of hurt him. It was something that him and his son started a while back and saved their family, and he just kind of left it, and so it kind of hurt Frederick. This brings us to the year of 1945, when to John Afton a son was born, and he named him William Afton. By the 1950s, William Afton was, around 5 to 6 years old, and because his father was a medical doctor, he wasn't nearly at home, hardly at all, and never really talked or spent time with William Afton. And so William Afton ended up spending more time with his grandfather than his own parents. And by 1960, William Afton was 15 years old, and by this point, Frederick Afton had filled in William Afton with all the details about Fredbear Singing Show and how it was a great mark in Frederick Afton's life, something that he himself accomplished all on his own with no outside help. And William Afton loved hearing this story, and even thought to himself that someday he would love to bring back Fredbear's Singing Show. But William Afton also had some side effects. You see, since William Afton's father was not in his life, William Afton began showing a lot of not good character traits, such as dishonesty and violence, and these would carry over into the rest of William Afton's life, as we will see soon. Now, in the year of 1967, William Afton was finally married at the age of 22, and just a couple years later, in the year of 1969, their first child was born unto them, and his name was Michael Afton. Now, in the year of 1970, this is where things really kicked off for William Afton. At this point, he decided that it was his turn to carry on the filming tradition of Fredbear, and so teaming up with a fellow college student named Henry Emily, who was a wonderful, brilliant mind of an inventor, William Afton being the businessman, the two of them collaborated and started their own business. William Afton made a spin-off of the name of Fredbear and called it Fazbear Entertainment. The two men were absolutely determined to make it the best circus show ever imaginably known possible, but there was a couple problems standing in their way. One was finances. William Afton had money, and so did Henry Emily, but together, their funds just simply weren't enough to make it as big as they wanted it to be. So they knew they would have to start off slow. The next biggest issue was another rival company called MCM. Edwin Murray's Costume Manor. Edwin Murray had owned this business for many years and supplied a lot of the inventions and carnival rides and costumes that you would see at things like circuses and festivals, and William Afton, to be honest, coveted a lot of what Edwin Murray had created. The MCM was known all over the country as creating the best sort of now new animatronics in the 1970s. And so William Afton knew that this competitor was always going to be a problem, and Fazbear Entertainment needed to be the next MCM, not Edwin Murray. Fazbear Entertainment just was so new, no one had heard about it, so they knew that they were going to have to get their name out there more to actually become recognizable. And what a better place to do that than the 1970 annual Fall Fest. MCM was actually going to be there, but Fazbear Entertainment needed to finally get their name out in the public. And we are going to stop and put a bookmarker right there, but don't worry because I will do a part 2 on this video, so make sure to keep your eyes out for that, and in the meantime check out another one of my theories on Midnight Motorist right here. See you next time.